Even as we talk about infinite, we're like traveling over a map where every inch is really hundreds of millions of miles, so to speak. But on the map, it's a smaller version. So there is actually this idea of gevura I found in the Kabbalah that discusses like an aspect of gevura, I think it's din is actually the word. Din means judgment or limits even that are already on some level there and not there, as Kabbalistic terminology of it was there and not there, because that's something that Kabbalah likes to say, that there's a concept that has some relationship to that place. It isn't really present in a tangible way. That even within the Or Ein Sof, Shalafnei Tzimtzum, even within the infinite light, before the contraction, there was the attribute of judgment. After all, we say, in the beginning, God wanted to create with the attribute of judgment. Now, you could say that's going on some later stage after the Tzimtzum, but maybe you could even say that even within the Or Ein Sof, even with the infinite light, before the contraction, there was already an aspect of limits, or either Malchus of Or Ein Sof, the last level of Or Ein Sof, that is, like you said, it's a shame. It's a name. It wants to relate to us. Could you connect that to what happens after there is a Tzimtzum? In other words, what's the relationship between the before and after? What is left? And why is it necessary to remove the light if anyway you need what's left from the light? We call it the Rishima. We call it this residual energy, this residual light, some type of light that's more finite, that's actually going to be considered the source of the vessels. Could we arguably say that everything we know as a vessel, and I don't just mean a physical vessel like a cup, but I mean what Rabbi Ashlag calls the desire to receive, or what Chabad would call simply a vessel, has its source in the Or Ein Sof Shalafnei Tzimtzum, in the infinite light before the Tzimtzum, that even in that infinite light, because it's infinite even in its ability to contain finiteness, that it's already there in the source exists the potential for the vessels and just needed to be revealed through it was already there, but it's like something that can't be seen because the light is on. But when the light is off, all of a sudden you see like something that you didn't notice before, because you needed just the soft glow of a candle to be able to see something so subtle. Could there be some relationship between what we know here in this physical world and Or Ein Sof Shalafnei Tzimtzum? What would that be? What would that? The Koach HaGvul. In other words, is there any way of relating to the power of the finite that's within the infinite light?
Okay.
Or do you need the Tzimtzum? I'm going back to this thing. Why do we need the Tzimtzum? I want to undo this Tzimtzum thing.
I'm first going to discuss what took place before the Tzimtzum, why we needed a Tzimtzum, and there are different reasons that are given. The general, traditional reason that's quite often used is because the revelation was infinite, and in order to limit the revelation, in a qualitative way, it was basically there was a tzimtzum, there was a restriction. But then there is another explanation, that before the tzimtzum, the potential for limit and the potential for infinite were both mixed together. They were all blended together as one light. And therefore, one of the points and purposes of the tzimtzum was to separate one from another. And in fact, the Rebbe Rashab, again the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, in late 1909, when he speaks about it on the Tishri time, Rosh Hashanah time, he gives a whole sequence of Maimorim, discourses, and he says that this is basically what it says by the creation, Vayavdel Elikim bein ha'orev ve'in ha'cheshech, that the Almighty separated between the dark and the light. He says, what does it mean, light and dark? It wasn't dark. He says between the light which is infinite and the light that comes down in a finite way. And this is what the Tzimtzum accomplished. It limited between the two that each one should stand out for itself. And indeed, what happened after that was the Rishimo, which is the residue of what came after that, represents the source for the finite, represents the source for world and vessels.
So you wouldn't say it represents the source while it's within the Or Ein Sof, because it's, I know in Ayin Beis, that's actually this year, 100 years ago. What is that?
1912.
1912. He talks about this idea that you can't even call the source in the Or Ein Sof Shel Lefnei Tzimtzum. He's very,
right.
Very. It's even if it's there, it's not there, but because it can't be identified. Yet there's something that, if we could reveal it, that the Tzimtzum is just revealing something that was there all along.
Okay, the
peeling away the infinite aspect.
Right. The Rishimo that came after that, what came after the Tzimtzum, is basically basically rooted in before the Tzimtzum, as it was the finite and the infinite revelations together. So then each one was separated. So came the finite, which is the Rishimo, and then after that comes the Kav, which is the revelation itself. Both of them serve as sources for later worlds, for the lower worlds, for vessels and revelations. That's how it breaks down, these two sources. The Rishimo and the Kav are basically the source for vessels and revelation. But before the Tzimtzum, they were both together as one, and then after that, they stand out as separate entities. But we cannot say that the Rishimo has a source before, because it is like saying the difference between before the creation and after the creation. We can't say something was there before the creation. There was no creation. So therefore we can't say that there was some entity of a Rishimo or something, that this is the beginning and this is the cause and the effect. And therefore it is considered like a creation, a whole new creation. It is a creation because it's a whole new being. This is basically what Tzimtzum brought about. But on the other hand, there was already the infinite and finite together, and they were separated by the Tzimtzum.
Is that why they're mixed? Can the finite have
mixed
infinite,
together? Right.
Have finite?
Right. In an example of the physical world, Chassidus brings an example of a teacher. There's a teacher that he learns a subject on a very deep level, and then he needs to relate it to a student, and the student does not really have the background of knowledge of this teacher. So the first thing the teacher has to do is has to black out whatever he has in his mind, and then start again preparing and processing it in a way how he can give it over to the student. So this is the finite as it is in the mind of the teacher, who is infinite in a certain sense, relatively.
Okay. So that's a little bit about the Rishima, this power of the finite that was what was there in an unrecognizable way, so to speak. Like, I mean, one way to put it is, I don't know where is the proper place to say this about, but the idea of just to like relate this to you guys, instead of it being just metaphysical about worlds, I think there's an idea that if you can really love somebody else truly and fully, that you've entered into a place where there's no barriers between the two of you, meaning that if you see yourself as a soul and that person is a soul, and you relate to them on a soul level, you remove all barriers. And in fact, maybe that was the beginning of creation. Before there was this separation, we all were like one soul. Adam's soul, according to the Kabbalah, was that idea where all souls were contained in one being, until he ate from that wheat, date, fig, whatever it was, which could mean that the tzimtzum is when a person thinks of themselves as really separate from another human being. After all, we're in our own body. It's when you're, what we call in psychology, the ego boundaries are up, and you know that you are you, I am me, and you are you. And that's the tzimtzum on a personal level. Because this idea on a bigger level is really not just about God, it's about humanity. And it's about what's the vision for humanity. We need to become independent. I think the word in psychology is we need to individuate. We need to, just like a child needs to become self-sufficient and not need its mother for everything. There's a question when life begins, in terms of like abortion. And the Jewish version of when life begins is when you graduate medical school. Not anymore. Now you have to be a hedge fund manager or something. Anyway, I'm getting off the subject here, but a little humor is in order because we're talking about the Rishimu. But I think we're going to. So what I just wanted to bring out is that Chassidus, one of the powerful things in Chassidus, is that we can take these concepts and understand that there's a continuum of this conversation between understanding the cosmos, understanding the spiritual worlds, and also understanding interpersonal dynamics. And this idea of the tzimtzum, the rishimo. And now let's talk about the kav.